Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Unconventional Therapist. My name is Dave. I'm here with my co-host, Greg, and we are here for a holiday special episode.
That's right.
It's not really a special episode because we'd be recording this no matter what, but it is a holiday week, so I guess we'll say it's a special episode.
We always use the holidays to give us a little hiss of an idea, don't we?
Yeah, I think it's important.
I do too. And it's almost self-evident, right? You see what I'm doing there?
No.
Oh, like we hold these truths to be self-evident, you know?
Oh, okay.
This kind of things.
I still
Like you've heard these words before. Yeah, Dave, I am jumping right in if that's okay.
Okay. All right.
So listen, because you're going to like this. Because when I was like kind of like formulating like just this very beginning, I was thinking of you. I know you're gonna like this.
Okay.
So like, you know, the self, but the quote that I like more from the Constitution, which is very sort of existential, is it came from a philosopher for starters. Like life, liberty, and the pursuit of property was the original sort of idea, right? And that's the John Locke thing. But Jefferson pretty blatantly ripped that off. I mean, you can see, right, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I think if we try to understand what Jefferson meant by the pursuit of happiness, we can start to see like why this country, you know, was so good for so long, and like, and you know, and in so many ways still is, right? So it's not the job of government to create a life for you or even help you, but like in The Alchemist, it's the possibility of a dream coming true is what they were looking for, right? Like, so this idea that your success and your failure is not anybody's responsibility but your own.
Okay.
And I think for us in therapy, we see a lot of the time that there's like lack of achievement, and maybe achievement is not the right word, but lack of aspiration. It's sort of an epidemic. And without these things, you know, you want to feel happiness, but without achievement or without goals. And then I think that's like how addiction happens and how depression happens and all these kinds of things. So I know I'm going a little long here, but like when they're thinking of the word happiness, it's not about feeling good, it's about being good. Right? That's what it's all about. It's about working towards your values and, you know, greatness or excellence in aspiration to become. So this is what these people are all about when they're creating this idea for the country, like a place where people can become who they want to be without restrictions of like monarchy or feudal systems or any of that. And this is what it's about. What do you think?
I got caught up on something you said like 2 sentences ago, and
Okay.
I haven't been able to like listen since.
Let's
then.
run it back.
You said this country's already great.
Yeah.
So you don't think that we have to like make it great again, do you? Because it's like already great. Is that what you're saying? You're on the same page with me as in that one.
So what I'm saying is, oh well, if we were going to say,
you don't have to answer that. That was a setup, Greg. You don't.
No. And you know what's funny is, and we'll talk. So the founding fathers thought about all this stuff, and so I don't think we're like you and I are as far away as people can be, sort of in terms of like political ideology, or I mean just the ideology in general, but like we are two people who can sort of have different opinions and be productive about it.
Yeah.
And sort of George Washington, during his farewell address, he talked about this, how like people are not going to be able to disagree and like be productive. And I think he called that. Isn't that sort of like what's going on here?
Yeah. So like we wouldn't like have issues and start disagreeing with each other and then like stop all amounts of productivity and then start arguing about who has the better handicap in golf, right? Like that would never be us.
Yeah.
Right.
So we are doing a very American sadly, I know what that I understand what you're talking about. Yeah. But I didn't watch it. You know, it's one of those things where like growing up, I was very, very much like into politics, but sadly, and I'm not gonna like reveal my hand either way, but because the reality being, I don't have a dog in the fight.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think we need to really say anything about either side there. I think it was hard to watch in
Hard to
general,
watch.
and it
Yeah.
was hard to discuss with people and hear other
Mhm.
people's views of it because nobody left feeling really great.
Yeah, if you're saying to yourself, my guy did pretty good, then like it's a little bit of self-deceit there.
Yeah, you
right?
didn't really set the bar very high for your guy, whoever your guy was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's
And
that's
also-
literally whoever your guy was.
Yeah.
That's
Also,
being,
you mentioned two other things like John Locke. Do you know? And like as you mentioned John Locke, I was thinking that's the name of. Isn't that the name of the guy on Lost? Have we already had that discussion or no?
no, because I've never seen Lost.
I thought maybe we did have this discussion at one time, and you mentioned John Locke, and I was like, "Wait, John Locke from Lost?"
Yeah.
And then you told me you never saw it.
The Enlightenment philosopher, but I mean, maybe that's where that. So
It
yeah,
must be that reference, and that show had so many like layers to it. They would be totally in the realm of that show to have a character named John Locke for sure.
so this is making me think too, as we're talking about John Locke and the pursuit of property, he was kind of meaning the same thing as Jefferson when Jefferson says the pursuit of happiness, and we kind of talked about what we mean by that. But Dave, for you and I think like the most important word here, what is the American ideal and what became the American ideal is right there in that sentence. It's just the right of the pursuit towards your thing, right? Like pursuit.
I always think of like that ancient philosopher Kid Cudi in his song "Pursuit of Happiness," and he was really onto something with that one. I think so. Shout out to Kid Cudi.
Dave, you are on the cutting edge of like really.
Yeah.
Like, you're a cool guy, man.
If like cutting edge means I reference a song that's like over 10 years old now.
Yeah. Okay. He's also a fabulous actor.
He really is. Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
Scott, I think is his real name.
I'm a big fan. I actually am.
It's Kid Cudi, aka Scott. All right. So I'm so sorry to get us off the rails here, but our topic today is the American dream.
Yeah.
And not just the American dream, what it is, what it was, what it will be, and is it even a thing? Is it even achievable? So in order to like actually look at that, I guess we have to kind of go to the origin of the American dream, which is something that was very brand new to me. Like I never really thought about it. This is a listener request. I want to just point that out. We were requested to do the American dream, and it just happened to be perfect timing that message came in. And then we have 4th of July coming up. So what better time to talk about something that is so American as the dream of America, the American dream. Yeah. So the phrase was popularized by James Truslow Adams during the Great Depression in 1931 in his book, Epic of America. Adams defined it as the dream of this is a quote from Adams. Okay. I'm not just paraphrasing or making this up.
Mm-hmm.
That dream of a land in which life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement. It is not a dream of motor cars and high wages merely, but a dream of social order in which each man and each woman shall be able to attain to the fullest stature of which they are innately capable, and be recognized by others for what they are, regardless of their fortuitous circumstances of birth or position. Now, I think that there's a lot of things to unpack in that little quote right there. But Greg, what's your reactions when you hear that?
I have an interesting reaction, believe it or not. Doesn't happen often.
Are you aroused?
Yeah, I'm slightly strangely aroused. I'm in my, American flag boxer shorts. Oh, I don't even know if that's, if we got into the rules of the flag, that's very disrespectful. I wouldn't do that.
Putting them on your bum?
Yeah, they're on my bum. So here's the thing with that. So you're in the Depression. You're in a difficult time. And then there's this thought of this promised land, almost like orienting yourself in the future with something hopeful, something to work towards. And that's not the first time like we've seen that. I'm thinking of Moses, right?
My favorite right there.
Your favorite. I know. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get to bring up Moses. But like, wasn't that the thing when the Jews were dealing with slavery and held captive by Egypt, and they had this prophecy that there would be a deliverer who would take them to the land of milk and honey, the promised land, all these things. But that's sort of what they're talking about here in America, where things are so bad during the Depression,
Yeah.
and this idea of something that could be great to work towards.
So you know what's interesting about this, though, is the man delivering this just happens to be rather wealthy.
Hmm.
So this could probably not sit right with some Americans, while others are like, yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Hmm.
But interesting time. And I think you're exactly right. Like, this seems like a message that would corral and uplift people if they can look past the fact that this is coming from a person who has way more wealth and ability to achieve than any of them. But
Yeah, they're
with that,
they're not satiated on food; they're satiated on a dream.
like, he should put in his quote, it is not a dream of motor cars. He should put, it is not a dream of my motor cars. Those are mine, not
Yeah.
yours. You're in your
Yeah,
horse
no,
and
yeah,
carriage.
no. It's interesting that you say that. So I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same. We'll come to find out as we go.
Oh,
on.
100%. So, as you were mentioning, the emphasis here is on democracy, liberty, equality, and it's taking a lot of the ideals straight from the Declaration of Independence, which states that all men are created equal and have an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which we've already mentioned. So it's like baked right into that idea that we are all created equal in not so much. I liked like a few phrases he says I think are important because that explains why we're not all going to get equal, right? He's not saying everybody should have equal amounts. He's not emphasizing that this should be a communist society.
Mhm.
He's saying it is based on your own ability and capability. So what I get is going to be different from what you get and from what our neighbor gets and all that stuff, right? But it's all about maxing out your potential. And you can't be wrong when you say this because, he doesn't know your potential. He's not going to tell you how much you like. So basically, he's not committing to anything. He's giving you this idea that, like, meet your potential. And that's what the American dream should be.
Have you ever considered how you're choosing to communicate and what the quality of that communication does? Hi, I'm Abby, and I invite you to join me for the third season of my podcast, Stories Lived, Stories Told, where each week I am joined by a different conversation partner, and together we'll use communication as a lens to explore a topic they're passionate about. And whether you are familiar with a given topic or not, the hope is that by centering communication, we can reveal new ways of seeing and being. So join me for Stories Lived, Stories Told with new episodes every Monday and learn to create better social worlds through communication.
Yeah, like there's a possibility for you to meet your potential, which is actually a great thing. It's funny that like when you're put in like difficult situations, like all right, when I was in the Navy or like when we were in grad school, like the honor of that was that we were in a position when where we were able to meet our potential or try our best or use our assets. Like when you're able to try and use every talent that you think you have, that's sort of what happiness is in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're at home and you don't have any opportunity to do anything, like you're a serf or you're a prisoner, you have no opportunity, so you can never like experience your potential. And I think that's what makes America, the idea of America, great. And also there's a couple things there too where it's like all men are created equal. I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't say like where that's not lost on us. So we understand that they were saying that out of one side of their mouth at the time. And that's not really what was going on.
What's funny is he's saying all men are created equal, but also acknowledging that everybody's capabilities are different.
Yeah.
So we all have the right to freedom and independence, but we don't all have the right to the same value of things, I guess you would say. I'm trying to think of another way to frame that. Like this whole structure would really suffer today because everybody wants measurable amounts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It would be so difficult for us as a society today to say, because of your abilities, you're probably not going to get as much as this person. That because everybody feels like they need to have the same amount, the same or better than everybody else.
But even as you say that though, it's like sounds mean, but it's absolutely true and logical.
Yeah.
And rational.
It's
and I think that's
100%.
Right, like the founding fathers are all about like rational thought. Like that
Yeah.
was the highest power.
I never,
Yeah,
I
no,
never,
it's interesting.
I never thought about how much of like MLK's speech like is also so deeply like entrenched in the American dream. But also he uses his own spin on it. So you know, in the I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self evident that all men are created equal. I mean, that's right there, the MLK quote. So he's really using that for his like civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And I think that's such like that's just another example of how, you know, genius he was with his words and his ability to articulate you know, his idea of what he saw the future.
Yeah, because how do you argue that all you're really asking for is a meritocracy where like you get what you earn,
Yeah.
and just give me the right to earn.
Right.
And yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that we are not going to be judged by our color, but the content of their character
Yeah.
is another quote. And yet again, it's like, yeah, like why are you judging me? I am still where all men are created equal. I am equal with you. Why are you judging me or treating me less than when we're all supposed to be equal?
It's like such an existential position of strength where it's like I think that's it, just like even when you think of like America, you think of going west, you think of like starting over, you think of like this could fail or this could be it's no guts, no glory, right? It's very
Exactly.
much what we are.
So you just actually led me right into the next thing I wanted to talk about was so that's kind of that's the origin of the American dream. That's how that term really became. But like the American dream, just maybe we didn't use that terminology, but it existed prior, and it's changed a lot over time. Or I mean, maybe not a lot, but it's changed over time. So the roots of it, like when it first started, was like with the goals and the aspirations of the first European settlers and colonizers. Most of them came to North America content to escape like tyranny, religious and political persecution, or poverty. So, you know, their American dream, quote unquote, is what? Religious freedom, political freedom, you know, just it's a better life. So they come here with that idea. Then it became centered around westward expansion and frontier life. So they, you know, in 1974, the Virginia's governor, John Murray, he said that most Americans were constantly imagining that the lands further off were still better than those which upon they had already settled. And he also noted that there was like constant dissatisfaction and desire. They just desired more and more or better and better. Just like that, never just being satisfied with what they have.
Yeah.
So in that time, it almost is like the American dream is all about expanding, but this idea that like we need more.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to settle for this, which I think it's good and bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like there's a lack of appreciation for what they've already built. And like almost like something you see today with like that competitive or that like almost like gluttony.
Yeah, no,
in like
absolutely.
a weird way, right?
You know, it's a very anti-Buddhist because Buddhists would say like the craving is
Yes.
like the antithesis of enlightenment, and you know we're constantly craving. That's why we're never happy, right? So,
Yes.
But without the constant craving, like what is anything ever created? You know,
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's definitely got its pros and cons. In the 19th century, those were the beginnings of the mass immigration, and that greatly affected what like the American dream would be during this time. One example that I had read was, you know, highly educated Germans who ran to the U.S. after the failure of 1848's German Revolution with an attempt to break down hierarchical standards. They were drawn by the political and economic freedoms embraced in America, and the fact that America didn't operate on the same class system, nor did it have the notion that a person could only achieve as much as their class dictated. So it was that idea that like you could self-achieve, right? You're not forced to kind of settle just it, you know. So more and more, the idea of this American dream really does feel like it's about part of it's about self-achievement, self-determination.
Yeah.
But part of it's also rooted in greed in like in a weird way, right?
It's always rooted in that word pursuit.
Yes.
right? It's
Pursuit.
like I can
Yep.
I can do more. Or like, so I'm thinking of like if we're talking around like the 30s, obviously very early 40s, like maybe a Jewish person would want to leave Germany or Hungary or Poland or any of these places,
Yeah.
right? Because if they stay where they are, they're limited, right? They
Yeah.
want to go somewhere where they can pursue, where they can reach something more than they ever thought they could, right?
Yeah.
That's America.
I have one more great example of exactly what you're talking
Good,
about.
hit me.
So in 1849, with the discovery in California of gold, though, hundreds of thousands of men, flooding to California, believing that they too could, get rich overnight. And most did not, obviously, and a lot of them spent like their entire family's savings to find nothing. But of course, some men did. So for some, the American dream definitely worked, while others were left with nothing.
And that's kind of a perfect metaphor for what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
And in that book that we've talked about 1,000 times, The Alchemist, and there is that great quote where, and it sort of reflects exactly what you're talking about for the gold rush. The 1840s, you're out there, you're like, this could change my life completely. And it's just that the possibility of a dream coming true is what makes life worth living, right?
Yeah.
Just that possibility, like what could happen if I work towards this. It's really interesting. And it is kind of like a philosophy, right? To be American.
Sure. So previous American dreams were supposed to be about that pursuit of happiness, freedom, independence. But as we see, a lot of it was also entrenched in money, wealth, equity, which kind of brings us to like modern time. And I think the American dream definitely can be said to be rooted in achieving material wealth and upward mobility in today's time. So I'll let you kind of take the lead on describing that a little bit.
Yeah, so if we're coming into sort of modern times, when I think of, that's what I think of when I think of the American dream. Like, I think of a few things. I think of home ownership. I think of whatever your parents. So as a parent, if my kids rise one station or a socioeconomic step above me, then I think that's sort of the American dream alive and well. But let me just sort of take you to the 1970s, where they say, Dave, and I didn't know this, wages have been going down since 1975.
Really?
Yes. And here's what's interesting about that. And it's all, I'm not an economist, and obviously there's inflation, there's coal, cost of living, all these things, right? But the debt to income ratio is what's important here. So if you are going to buy a house in 1975, your nice house is going to cost about double your yearly salary on average. Right now, it's going to cost about 6 times your yearly salary. So that's putting that goal way far out. And now you get
it must be worse than ever within the past, I don't know, 3, 4, maybe longer years with the price of housing. Like,
you're right. It almost does feel like 5 years have changed so much.
Well, I know, obviously, the pandemic threw off a lot of things, but like the housing market, like, just blew up.
Yeah, and there's something really insidious about that, and it's these I can't really speak to this really too much, but like BlackRock and State Street, all these like huge hedge funds or whatever they are buying houses, not people, which seems really messed up, right? Like they're just buying houses to have houses. Like, I don't understand what that's about. That's sort of usurping the American dream from people who you're taking that from people, and that seems really dark to me. Now,
you never know when you might need a good house,
Yeah, you never know when you might need a stack of houses. I think I know what they're going to do with them. So, and that's what they're making them 6 times more expensive than they used to be.
Yeah,
but and when I said that to you, and I don't know if any people are unable to see your face, but your face was like, "Oh my god!" Like, what do you mean? Like, wages have been going down since 1975? And because I had the same sort of reaction. But then I'm thinking about when we're growing up, Dave, and we're watching a sitcom, and the dad is taking care of the whole family, and he's a cashier at a supermarket. Or remember Al Bundy,
Shoe salesman.
shoe salesman, a pretty nice house.
Yeah.
And his family was fine. They were taken care of. The wife was stay at home. So it's like, what is that about? Right. I mean, so it's kind of, it's like,
Right.
I think about that sometimes. Like, even when I was a kid growing up, my dad had a job. My mom sort of had like jobs in between, like here and there.
Mhm.
But for the most part, he had his job, and it was, he was a truck driver,
Yep.
very honorable job. But nowadays, I don't know if you could swing that, or maybe they like
Yeah.
make a lot more money now.
My
But
my dad had his full-time job. He always had like a little side job that he would do, like, on the weekends or something. My mom always had 1 to 2 jobs that she would fill in at. One regular job and then maybe another job she would fill in at. So it was
the
always
Lazats were
that,
hustling, huh? They were chasing that American dream.
constantly. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what's funny though? You hustled to what? Be middle class,
Yeah.
right? You didn't
yeah.
hustle to be able to exceed that, because that, I don't know. It just that's always been my
so you're
mindset.
hitting something there. Like, so now it almost feels like you're on a treadmill where it's like you can work as hard as you want, but you can only get so far. It's limiting, and it's scary. And maybe it's a part of it is like these huge corporations. Maybe it's there's a huge gap between the poor, and I mean the poor is like kind of so many of us right now, right? There's
Yeah.
like the middle class is sort of disappearing. The poor, counting us, I guess, and the rich. There's a huge gap between like what our assets are. It's kind
I might be in the rich category this year though.
Oh, okay.
Just
I,
saying.
I didn't know that.
I was poor
Well,
until this year.
this guy's hustling too. That's the Lazat line. That's
Yeah.
what they do.
You know, it's funny. You just said the treadmill thing, and
Yeah.
Adams actually warned Americans about that.
Adams, like John Adams?
No, the guy that I mentioned at the beginning, I can't remember his name. James Truslow Adams, who
okay.
kind of coined the American Dream term. He actually warned about workers getting into a treadmill in which they earn but they can't enjoy, so that it just like that whole mindset of like being hyper focused on work and trying to earn but never actually getting to appreciate or enjoy your own wealth or your own income. And we can all relate to that, right?
Yeah. Oh, can I ever?
I think that's so fascinating that he actually warned society about that.
Or was
back
he
in like 1930s?
So what surprises me that there's treadmills in the 30s, but we don't even need to get into that. But I think that is he also sort of, I always think of the darker side of things where it's like, hey, don't work too hard because you want to enjoy it. It's almost like keeping people in their station too.
Sure, it could be. I mean, he was like warning people of the dangers of capitalism and mass consumption. That was kind of like the frame. And then he cites dangers to what he was calling intellectual workers. People who just like kind of focus on like the needs of business or mass consumption. I don't know. It's an interesting thing because you're right. Like, was his message kind of like geared to sway or kind of influence thought of society, or was he truly, I don't know, like coining this like motivational thing, but also like really concerned with the well-being of Americans? I don't know.
It's like maybe both. It can be true at the same time.
Sure,
just like
maybe.
most things, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's you're making me think of Kurt Vonnegut, and he says like the biggest lie is anyone can be whatever they want, right? And what's scary about that, because that's unfortunately very true that that's a lie, is that we're talking about what this guy's warning about is like, hey, like be careful working your ass off and trying to just, because there's this thought that like if you just grind and you do your best and you do everything you possibly can, you work hard every single day, you will achieve that high station that you have in mind. That's not true. You might, and you won't unless you do that, but you can work your ass off and try your best and do everything possible and still not do anything.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know.
Scary. Kurt Vonnegut said that.
He said the biggest lie is anyone can be whatever they want.
right before he went back in time and then
Yeah.
flash forward to the future.
Oh, Kilgore Trout. Oh, we've got a Vonnegut fan here. I didn't know that. Yeah. So, I mean, Dave, I got to ask you, in your mind, in 2024, what is the American dream? And should we be kind of, have we passed it? Like, what does it look like?
So I'm like, I have a few different ideas, I guess, because like I don't know that I'm like, after doing this week's research, I probably left this with feeling not very certain about my view of this. I think part of me thinks the American dream is to have more than your neighbor, to be like, it feels like society is always in a pissing match with each other, and like everybody's just trying to one up the next person. Everybody thinks that they're entitled to get rich, which I don't necessarily disagree with. Like, if we're looking at like maxing out your potential, do your thing, but like not everybody is going to get rich. And we don't all deserve the same thing. I think our efforts are important. I think that there is a lot of truth to what was said earlier by James Tressel Adams about not everybody's capabilities are going to be the same. And just because your capabilities are not the same doesn't mean you still deserve the same amount as this person who put in a ton of effort and maybe has more capabilities.
Or even more luck, which is a thing.
Or more luck. Right. That's 100%. Like, I think we as a society can get very envious of each other. And I think that's very dangerous. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others, and we're constantly looking over our back to, see, because we constantly think people are coming for us, but we're coming for people just as much. So I don't know. There's that part of it, but then there's also this other part that, like, I like the idea that like the American dream is could also just be about just getting out there, entrepreneurship, building and establishing a life for yourself, whatever that has to be. Like, I don't think owning a house has to be the benchmarker of the American dream. There's plenty of people who rent. There's plenty of people who are totally happy living in a minimalist kind of environment. But like maxing your potential, getting out there, doing your thing, hustling, making enough income so that you can enjoy your life and have a happy life. I think that's the American dream. And I think it's individual to everybody these days. I don't think that there is like a blanket American dream. I think it's kind of almost dangerous to have a blanket American dream, because I think that caused a lot of people to force themselves into a lifestyle that was not authentic to them. And I think that probably that's like, when you think about that, like 40s, 50s, like, closeted individuals who are like super unhappy, but they feeling like they're just going through the motions, doing what they're supposed to do, almost like into what we were talking about last week with the coming out episode. Like, I feel like that almost promotes unhappiness when you're just like feeling like you have to fit the structural role of what the American dream is supposed to be. That's my long answer.
I know. I agree with you. And I like that, because even things shift is what you're kind of talking about too. So home ownership, like, sadly, it's like getting more difficult, and maybe things are shifting towards, like you said, like being an entrepreneur. It's just this idea that, yes, there are opportunities out there. You can rise above your station. You can become, you don't deserve to, right?
Yeah.
You don't deserve anything. That's what's part of this thing, is like, it's all about, what you're going to do. It's the Wild West. There are possibilities out there for you. Like, no one has any claim to them. It's just, you go. Some of us are going to get it and some of us aren't. And that's the dream.
I love that you just brought up the Wild West, because I think that is like such a great analogy for kind of what we're saying. It is like, Can you imagine in the Wild West and be like, hey, I should get that too? No.
Nope.
No. And then, like, I'm not saying we should go around and like just shoot our competitors like they would then. But at the same time, it's like, no, you got what you earned, and that's it, right? You didn't complain about it. You don't go and like demand equal payment or whatever. You got to earn. But with that being said, opportunities should be open to everybody.
Right.
So like what MLK is fighting for, women in the workplace, what they're fighting for, that equal opportunity. I feel that's so important that we continue to fight and advocate for equal pay.
It should be
not equal pay.
equally difficult
but-
for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't think, it shouldn't be based on just because you're this gender, you're able to make this much versus if you were that gender, you're going to make that much. I don't think that stuff has a place in today's society.
No.
It should be if you're qualified and the quality and productivity should basically determine your pay. But
yeah, and it's interesting.
Who am I to say?
When we talked about Adler, we talked about his idea was what made people sort of healthy mentally is their will to power.
Yeah.
And it's kind of what we're talking about here,
Yeah.
right? This idea that like to forget about your insecurities and just rise and to sort of reach your potential. Right.
Think about this, Greg. If we knew that we were only going to get like doing the work that we do, if we knew we could only get so much, not that pay is the most important thing in the job that we do, obviously, but it is a motivator. We are
thankfully
we are trying to establish lives and be able to do the things we want to do, support families, all yada yada. But if we knew that we all were going to get one rate of pay and it was going to be equal to everybody, would we feel like motivated for like longevity within this field?
Hell no. And
we're constantly looking around and seeing like what competitor rates could be and kind of knowing not necessarily that we're going to jump ship all the time, but like we have this conversation all the time, like just knowing our own worth and what we should be striving for, and not in saying and saying like we should be getting that, but it's like, how do I improve my performance so that I know that I'm worth that?
Mm-hmm. And if you take those opportunities or possibilities away, then the pursuit becomes pointless.
Yeah.
And with a system like this, the pursuit is everything.
If we were always doing this podcast for no money, would we be still doing this podcast? The answer is yes, we would. We're doing it now, but I guess that's the only point. There is no point to that.
Will we do it for free? Yeah, we do. So what about the barriers? Because there are, like you talked about them a little bit, and so we don't really get crazy into them, but I wanted to, because this is a very true, very real thing too. There's racial barriers, there's socioeconomic barriers. There's this idea of cultural capital where people are like almost, it's not just money that they're left. It's like a place in society, a station. And when I think about this, I think I've always my entire life wanted a beach house. And I don't know anybody who has a beach house unless someone in their family has already had a beach house. So it's almost like
left for them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like there's this generational wealth where people like hold on to these things. And
that's also luck, luck of the draw.
That's luck.
Sometimes you have a family member that has this thing, and that's
luck
awesome.
plays a huge role in it. And so I guess what we're saying is that in my mind, the American dream is still alive.
Those barriers, I think those are important to acknowledge. And I know that this conversation can go in a different direction, and I don't think we need to take it there. But when they talk about some people having privilege, I think that is kind of like what we're talking about when we talk about those barriers, because there are some people that because of the community that they're, a part of, they're not going to get the same opportunities, or, certain aspects of education or just employment just won't be available to them because they're just maybe not going to have the means to be able to get there, or they're going to have to take a different route in life. And that can cause them a barrier. And that's an unfortunate thing. And that's, again, luck of the draw. But
and that's the other thing. You're right about that. I was actually someone, and a lot of people might be listening to that and being like, nah, we all kind of got the same chance. And it's like, if you're completely honest with yourself, and we had a professor who, we played Monopoly, but some of us only got like $50, and some of us were, I mean, quote unquote, born with, like thousands, right? So yeah, like you could kind of like roll the perfect dice and kind of make it, but it's way harder than someone who can make a lot of mistakes, land on, Park Place a few times and just pay for it and not have to worry about it. And they'll outlast the bad luck where, some people won't.
Yeah.
And so there is those barriers are very real.
You know what that made me think of? Like, think of those individuals who are in a very well-to-do family or like, political families or something like that. And they always have like that one son who has like the troubled years of his life, right? He makes some poor choices. What often happens for that individual is like a lot of it's swept under the rug. He's protected. He,
Until it's like so egregious that you're like, oh my God, dude. Like,
but think about how many mess ups that person's able to make that are actually considered to be like okay, right? Where somebody who doesn't have that level of protection, that level of like wealth in their family or just power, I guess, they don't even get the chance sometimes to make one of those mistakes, and suddenly their life is completely, uprooted or upended. So yeah, there is a lot of things that can present as barriers. But if barriers didn't exist and everybody did have an equal opportunity, would that be chaos?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, that it wouldn't work. Like the way society is set up is there has to be haves and have-nots. Like there's the story of I think Methuselah, and he was a real king. The richest person to ever live. It was like an African king or something like that. And he would travel through cities. And then like he travels through there's this one story where he travels through a city and he gives everyone in the country, say, well, our equivalent of $1 million, right? So then it's like, well, society sort of crumbles because it's like, you can't, there's not enough. Everyone can't have $1 million because like it just doesn't work. Like you would buy up, one person could buy up all the food. It's just the system doesn't, the economy would crash. Like it just doesn't make any sense. It's just hard to run that way. And I can't really articulate exactly why that is, but you can kind of understand, right? If everyone has $1 million, no one has $1 million. It's
just bad news.
Yeah, it's bad news. That's why I'm like, when these politicians, I remember when that guy, Bloomberg, was running in New York City and he was like, spent $600 million on his campaign. And it's like, well, how many people are in New York? You could have just gave everyone $1 million. Like if someone gives me $1 million, I will vote for you. But obviously it doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's just a really, that is something we might want to get into at some point, like the political system and like how corrupt and just weird and dark that's getting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't even know if that's even possible to even kind of uncover all that.
Like they're eating babies, I heard.
People are hearing all kinds of things, I mean, it's all pretty, yeah, I don't know. At that level of power and elite, there's something about that diminishes all values. We saw it with the Blood Countess. We saw it, all the weirdest, creepiest crimes are committed by the wealthy.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
2 questions.
Sure.
Question number 1. Do we think that the initial American dream, as, shared by James Truslow Adams in 1931 during the Great Depression, do we think that was a rally cry? Do we think he was trying to was his intention to build people up that were struggling?
Yeah, I think his intention was to give those people who are in despair sort of a beacon to walk towards.
Okay.
Yeah.
In today's society, or maybe even over the years, though, as we see, we kind of talk about how the American dream is constantly changing based on what society looks like at that time. In today's society, is the American dream really made for people who are not wealthy?
I mean, first we'd have to say in today's society what the American dream is.
Yeah.
I guess it's wealth, right?
It's just wealth, right?
It's just wealth.
It's success and wealth.
It's kind of sad.
Fame? Is the American dream fame? Like to be famous, to get your 15 minutes and to have wealth?
Yeah, to have like a very popular TikTok account.
So I guess today's society feels more shallow.
Mm.
The American dream feels more shallow. I mean, but as we mentioned, it's been for a while. It's been kind of rooted in monetary value, right?
Yeah, you know what, David? You know
That
how
the benchmarker of homeownership though doesn't seem to exist. I don't think that's
No.
like the American dream anymore.
Yeah. Like, and you know, I am actually like, I'm an American like lover, like a proud veteran, all those things. But like, as I like see this sort of like what the American dream is now, and when the the founding fathers, with their lofty aspirations of like people living, they just wanted to like live their lives based on value, like a pursuit to happiness was a pursuit of excellence, like the best possible person, the most virtuous person you could be. That was what they wanted everyone to have. That's not the goal anymore for people,
No.
but
No.
it should be. Because, like, here's the thing: like, I don't think that's that far off. Like, if you have this idea that, you know, when we do this, we both do this. I know you do this, where we kind of have people identify their values and live in
Mhm.
accordance with them, because happiness is, you know, it's not having everything you want. It's living according to your values. That's what really makes people
Well,
happy.
yeah, you're exactly right. Like we do talk about values quite a bit because first off, your values are also intertwined with your identity.
Mhm.
So if you don't know what your identity is, like, hey, let's like at least start by looking at what your values are. And then you're exactly right. When you live a life that goes against your values, you feel like crap the
Mhm.
your entire time. And then you start to get into the self-deceit, justifying the bad behavior that you're doing. And yeah, you just never feel happy. And you know, it kind of makes sense why a lot of people in today's society don't feel happy because a lot of people are going against their own values because
Yeah.
society kind of makes us question whether we should, you know, if we should go in congruence with our values or not, right?
So they wanted the founding fathers wanted us to live a life of life, liberty, and the pursuit of our values. And now we're living a life in pursuit of wealth
Right.
and fame.
But, you know, just to play devil's advocate,
Okay.
there's tons of examples of behavior that was committed even by the founding fathers, even by people during, you know,
Sure.
long,
Yeah.
long ago that totally goes against virtue and like good values, right?
Yeah.
You know, so I mean,
Like
I don't think
all
that's
men are created
new.
equal, yet they're own slaves, and they're
Right.
worth a fraction of a person.
Yeah. I mean,
So
we're talking about, you know, they're, you know, colonizing or, you know, whatever. There's so much to unpack there. There's so many things that are contradictory to like how we want to look at
mm,
things. Like obviously we look at everything a lot with like rose colored glasses today when we look at a lot of that behavior. Well, maybe not today because I think a lot of that's kind of being discussed more openly. But yeah. So, all right.
well, yeah, and I'll help us wrap this up too. I'm just enjoying this conversation. But it's not that they're saying you need to live a perfect life, a life of
Right.
excellence.
Right.
It's that you want to have an idea of excellence and live towards that. You're gonna have shortcomings, but if you're living your life based on like this high ideal of what you could be, that's pretty powerful. And I think like what's important is that people track that. I've noticed lately in my own life, so I'm trying to like lose like 15 pounds, and I've actually been trying to do it for a really long time, and I just started maybe 20 days ago using this new map, and now that I'm like tracking it, it's like really helpful. And I wonder if that would be useful if like you can like have your values and then list them out in like a journal and then track which like how did I do in terms of like loyalty or honesty
Yeah.
or you know friendship or whatever it is, like whatever your values are. Tracking that just sort of make yourself a better person day by day. That maybe that's something.
I'm totally on board with tracking. I'm a huge fan of like making lists and just seeing progression. I do it with like anything and everything. So hey, that sounds like a really helpful tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wasn't that your nickname at our office though too? The helpful tool.
It's just tool.
It has a double meaning. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I think that that's not a bad sort of framework that we can start to think about a little bit with people.
Yeah. I think also like I think something we can all take away from this, hopefully this topic and maybe this episode. And obviously we're going into 4th of July, but like, even if you're listening to this on a week that's not 4th of July week, I think we do really need to like reevaluate what is the American dream.
Mhm.
What are we working for? You know, and like, I didn't necessarily want to bring this up, but like part of like a previous American dream was about immigration, and like establishing new lives, being excited about possibilities. You know, you
Mhm.
think about all like the flooding of all the immigrants into America and, you know, them starting these new lives back, you know, ages ago. And, you know, you think about where we all came from over, you know, over time. Like, well, we all came from immigrants. That, you know, that's except
That's
if you're
what
a
we,
Native
that's what
American.
we are. Yeah. that's
Except
like,
if you're a Native American, but like
yeah.
it's unfortunate how their, you know, history has gone. But that it's all about establishing a life for not just you, but for the future of your family, of society. So I think that it's also important to kind of think about what really America is all about. And like before we pass such harsh judgments on other people, think about, you know, how our nation even got started and what it's always been about. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that like everybody should be coming in and
No.
doing this, because like obviously there's plenty of things that need to be done to ensure that we know exactly who's, you know, who is entering and where, you know, what they're here for and all that stuff. But I do think that like, I know it's become such a hot topic in today's society that we kind of forget like what our nation is really even like was built on.
Yeah, and it's like this fear, I think. Okay, so, you know, we have a very individualist mindset, and I think that's good. I think that's kind of like what we've sort of always been. It's good and bad,
Yeah.
just like anything else. But so if you're an individual and you're trying to like reach your thing, you reach your goal, find your pursuit, and the idea of like other people coming in bothers you because it limits your chances. It's like, well, what is that saying about you? And how can you become better, right? And how can you
Yeah.
become stronger and more formidable? So it's an interesting conversation. Just it's if you're constantly trying to better yourself, worry about yourself. Worry about being the best you.
All we have to do.
Yeah, worry about yourself, pal.
It's your only job.
Yeah, yeah,
Aside from the other 3 jobs you have, but like
yeah.
it's your only like real job.
And you know, with that, Dave, you know, happy 4th of July. I know we have some redcoats listening, and I don't know how they celebrate the 4th of July. I bet you it's sort of an anti-holiday. But we love them just the same.
Yeah, and we have other people. We have a ton of people who listen from other countries. So you know, hopefully, we were able to shed a little light on, you know, what the American experience is, and I know that's another thing that like a lot of other countries have a harder time, I guess, understanding that.
Yeah.
That mindset, the American dream mindset. So.
And we know France takes a lot of heat historically for their role in wars, but without France, we wouldn't, you know, have America. So
Yeah.
Thank you to those guys.
Shout out to our French listeners, you know.
Shout out to the French listeners. Yep. And baguettes and whatever else. Eiffel Tower.
Oui. Yes.
That's right. Oui. And you know, happy 4th of July, Dave. It's one of my
Yes.
favorites.
Yes.
Just because the where it's nestled in the summer and the fireworks and all that stuff. It's pretty good.
And yeah,
Barbecues.
cookout food and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Are you gonna be grilling?
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
still smoking all those meats?
Oh yeah.
Greg,
I know,
is a
that's why I gotta get
professional
the-
meat smoker.
I gotta get the cholesterol down. That's the whole problem. You can't smoke meats for years at a time and then go in there and be surprised when the blood work comes back a little
Yeah.
askew.
Good point.
Yeah.
I still have never tried any of your.
Oh
smoked
man.
meat,
Well, listen, I'll
so-
probably smoke something on our annual Christmas extravaganza. So
Okay. All right.
we'll just do that.
I mean, if you want to do it sooner and just bring me in.
oh yeah, I could do it sooner too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Trust me, I'm down for that too.
Yeah.
But
So everybody, like, I hope this was an enjoyable episode. Shout out to the listener who recommended this. I really enjoyed, actually more than I thought I would have. But when I saw this topic that they recommended, I was like, oh, that actually does sound like something that would make a lot of sense for us to dig into. So I'm glad it was recommended. As far as where you guys can connect with us, obviously I say it every episode, but so we're on all the social media, Unconventional Therapists, anywhere you are on social media. And also utgnpodcast@gmail.com is our email if you want to connect to us there, or you can just press that friendly little fan mail button on your podcast streamer. We have gotten a ton of fan mail over the past few weeks. None this past week, but
No, we did. We got
a
one clearing up what they meant. But Chloe sent us a message talking about.
When did that come in? I totally missed that. All right.
She cleared
How
up
about
the
the
goth
goth?
question.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
I didn't even see that. So my apologies. I missed that one. But what was the answer anyway?
Sort of like so I'm just going off my memory here, like post-punk revival. So she wasn't talking about
Not like
the
the
word that
gothic.
did come from the Victorian era, but she's talking about sort of like the subculture post-punk
Okay.
kind of thing.
All right, cool. Which is what I initially thought. So
Yeah.
that was my first thought, like The Cure and all that. Excellent.
Yeah, it's like
So-
new wave though, right? Isn't that kind of what that is? Like new wave?
But they are considered goth,
Okay.
which is strange. But they definitely fit into both. And I never,
Like more is
We'll talk
Morrissey?
about
Yeah, all right, yeah.
Morrissey is also considered new wave, but that's
And
kind of
kind
an
of gothy.
interesting category. Yeah, he's definitely like sad boy. I love Morrissey and I love The Cure. The Cure is like one of my all-time favorites. So I'll be excited to talk about them. All right. And last but not least, please leave us a rating and review if you haven't done so. We really, really appreciate that. That means so much to us because it really does help us with making the podcast more accessible to others. So that's so important. We are trying to reach as many people as we can, all different countries, all around the world. So yeah, please, if you haven't yet, do that. And also, if you guys have episode recommendations today, like this is a great example of us actually doing them. So throw them our way. We have a laundry list of them, and I just love throwing a new one on there. So it gives us an idea of something we could do that maybe we wouldn't have thought of. So hopefully you guys will throw them our way. But yeah, all right. So everybody have a great night. We will see you next week. Yeah, that's about it.
We
Right,
will.
Greg?
That's it.
Okay. All right, everybody. Peace out. See you later. Bye-bye.